For our last session, we are turning to TCS and to Martin Neville, well known in ITSMF circles, and certainly one of our past chairs. Martin will be looking at key factors for a successful SIAM implementation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. You have to call me sir, I'm not a chair anymore. Thank you, Mark. Let me just try and work out how to share my screen. As I was saying to someone earlier on, I haven't used Zoom since lockdown, so there you go. There we are. All right.
All looks good.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get into. There we go. You can see it. So obviously now I can't see any chat or anything. So if any chat comes up again, Mark, please.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Please let me know. So here we go. SIAM lessons in the future. So we'll start off with who I am. I had a fairly good introduction already. I've been in IT 30 odd years. I'm an engagement director with TCS, but before that I was in the UK public sector. So I was one of those people who, that Claire mentioned earlier on, we're doing SIAM before it was called SIAM. We called it getting customers and suppliers to talk to each other. But it's obviously developed since then. I'm one of those people who was the authors of the SIAM body of knowledge, and I'm also an examiner. So as I said in my blurb for this, if you've taken the exams, I'm really sorry. Mark said I was former chair of ITSMF UK. I should be able to say that by now. And actually, the important thing I always try and stress is I'm not an IT dyed-in-the-wool person. I'm an accountant who's kind of fell into this, which means I tend to try and look at these things not from a technical point of view, but from much more of a user point of view, and hopefully that will come out in the next few slides. So what we're going to talk about, from my point of view, is common issues with SIAM implementations. We just had some really good insights, I think, in the previous presentation, which was kind of deep dive into one implementation. I'm trying to take a more sort of horizontal approach, looking across all the implementations I've been involved in my career. Talk a bit about metrics and reporting in business value terms. Talk a bit about specifically about as a service providers, which is again something Claire mentioned earlier on. And then looking at the future and how you do SIAM and product-centric operating models. So I hope that will kind of make sense. So common issues. The first one, and I see they've got a lot, is starting too early. SIAM is not something that can be undertaken lightly. It requires the customer, the organization, to be at least a little bit mature. You need to understand your landscape. You need to understand largely what your vendors are and what they do and how they interact. You need to have relatively mature processes, both in ITSM terms, but also in contract management terms and business relationship management terms. And if you leap in too early, it can be chaos. And I've been involved in some real chaotic implementations. And yes, you get through it, and yes, it's not impossible, but it makes it a whole lot easier if you've done an assessment beforehand and say yes, this organisation is ready. This is a timeline from a customer at TCS. It's a large UK retailer. And you can see, I mean, don't worry about the detail, but you can see right on there, we started with them in 2014. And we transitioned across 2014-15, we did our transition. Went through a stabilization stage, went through a service improvement stage, went through a service maturity stage. And it's only in 2018-19 that we start putting SIAM in, because it would have been chaos, it would have been difficult, and we wouldn't have got any value from it. So it takes time sometimes to take you from the position of entry to the position of actually being ready for SIAM. And there's, TCS has a product for, are you ready for SIAM? And I'm sure many others do as well. So it's a really important thing to do, to actually first assess, are you ready to do this? I'm sorry to move. This is the second biggest one as far as I'm concerned. The customer not understanding what they've signed up for, or the organizer. Obviously, I'm coming from a service provider point of view, but obviously if you're doing it to yourself, the management not understanding what they've signed up for. And this, I tend to put this into two categories, really. One is SIAM as a scapegoat. I had a discussion with a large pharmaceutical company when we were putting SIAM in about mitigation for SLA failure. So, SLA's gone. Why is it gone? Well, actually, it's because X, Y, Z happened, which is beyond anyone's control. What do you want to do about serious credit? And their answer was, I don't care. We've got a SIAM. It's your fault. We'll just lay serious credits on you. And the whole point of SIAM is it's not there to be blamed. It's there to support, to help, to grow, to govern. So that's number one. And number two, and this is I see this so often, is failure to do organizational change management. You can't put in SIAM and carry on doing what you're doing already. A large engineering company I was working with, literally, we said, no, you need to start doing things this way. No, we'll carry on doing this, they kept saying. And the old adage about insanity is doing the same thing time and time again and expecting something different to happen. This is what happens. It's really important for the whole organization to understand what it is that they are doing. It needs to understand what behaviors they need to stop, what behaviors they need to start. They need to understand how it all fits together into the bigger picture and what you're trying to achieve out of it. But also, there is a leadership thing there. You need to have leaders who can communicate, can really articulate what it is that they're trying to do, but also lead by example. So exhibit the change that you're looking for, to make sure that when someone says I'm not going to do this because the boss doesn't do it, you haven't got that argument. So organizational change management, I think Michelle said earlier on, it's about culture change. We often say that a SIAM is not really technical. It is a cultural project about changing the way you do things. So OCM, really, really important. Yes, and other vendors not playing nicely. So obviously, as TCS, we come in. Sometimes we're just a SIAM. Sometimes we're doing application development or infrastructure or workplace, whatever else. But we have to work with all the other suppliers. First one we have SIAM, so no one else has to do serious management. Of course you do. There may be an incident management team within the SIAM team, but they're looking at the big picture. They're not looking at, say, taking a name at random, say IBM are part of the equation. They still have to do their own incident management and then work with the SIAM to make sure that it relates with everybody else. You can't just outsource your service management to the SIAM, because it's about an overall coordinating action. And this is the one you get so often. Yes, we recognize the SIAM there, but we're just going to ignore you and carry on talking to the customer. And that's really difficult. That's really difficult because the reasons behind that can be multiple and complicated, but generally it means that you've got an uphill struggle trying to get anything coordinated. Now, you can do what you like in SIAM. You can try and talk to them. You can try and reason with these vendors. You can talk about the benefits. You can invite them to things and see how coordination works and how cooperation works, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, if they still carry on doing that, then you have to get the senior management involved. And one of the things we always try and have is in all of the vendor contracts a rights to manage clause, which means that the SIAM can manage that vendor. Although there is one organization, and I shan't mention who they are, but I can guarantee within 2 months of them starting a SIAM implementation, they'll be waving a contract at me saying, I don't have to do this because it says so here. And that's really unfortunate and very difficult to get through. So that's where you need to escalate. Failure to adapt your model. So whenever you're designing SIAM, you're looking at a future state. You're thinking, this is how it's going to happen, how things are going to work in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. And the one thing you can guarantee is what you think is going to happen won't happen. 80-20 rule, yeah, a lot of it will be right, but there'll be things that change. The market changes, the organization changes, the management changes, the technology changes, all these things. You need to continually adapt your model as you go to reflect all those changes, to reflect how the organization is working, and also how the organization is going to move. So, anticipate those changes. And you do that by, again, the TCS, we call it the captain's table. Sit at the highest level. There's usually a half-yearly meeting with our top people, with the CIO, and the top people from all the other people in the ecosystem. And all they do is talk strategy. It's nothing about detail. There's no escalations from anything else. It's all about where are we going. So all the people involved have the same picture of where the organization is going and what they need to do, therefore, to adapt to it and to or capitalize on it or support it. So adapt your model as you go, but try and also understand where the direction of travel is so you can anticipate those changes. And finally, reporting in IT terms. I used to, one of my first SIAM implementations at TCS was at Jaguar Land Rover. And we reported to the director of IT delivery, a guy called Phil Wharton, who was really, really good. And he reported everything to him and he'd say, so what? Whatever KPI you said, he'd say, so what? So we pick up the phone within 10 rings. So what? What does that mean to me? So actually stop reporting in terms of instant closures, in terms of number of incidents, whatever else. Start thinking about business terms. What is it for you? And the next slide, hopefully, will show you some of this. So this is basically the direction of travel that we did at Jaguar Land Rover. So at the start of the process, when I was first there, we had all those traditional IT metrics, like the time to respond, the time to resolve, the CMDB accuracy, and that's all good management information. You still need to measure that. But in terms of what does it do for the business, what does it mean for the business, it doesn't mean a great deal. It's not really giving them any information about how the business is affected by what you're doing. Customer satisfaction, possibly, but the rest of them are fairly ambiguous. So we started looking at sort of cloud metrics to give a bit more about how we're sort of changing the way that the organization is going, and we talked about virtualization indexes and license optimization and pay to usage rates. So we started getting things like money in there, and the one thing that most organizations understand is money. And then we kind of went into agile as well. So we started talking about sprint predictability and velocity and cost of rework and that kind of stuff. And again, it's all getting more towards, what is being delivered. But what we finally came up with was this. So these are business process metrics. And there was only a few of them, as you can see, but it actually meant something to the business. So I've got to move the window so I can actually see my slide. So the big one there, manufacturing uptime. By the time I left Jaguar Land Rover, I wasn't being measured in the things you see on the left-hand side of the screen. I was being measured by the lost production. How many cars were lost due to IT failure? Lost product development hours. We had some very highly paid designers who were using software which is the most expensive licenses I've ever seen in my entire life. So every hour lost of their time was a financial cost, but also could impact delivery of new models and all that kind of thing. Financial period processing, obviously, you've got to make sure that the bills are paid, but also that you can do the financial reporting for shareholder confidence. Payroll, obviously, you can pay people that don't show up for work. And customs data was really important because at the time, 80% of the output of Jaguar Land Rover was being exported. So unless you got the customs data right, you'd got a lot of cars sat on the side of a dock waiting for a boat which has already sailed because you haven't got your data in time. So what I'm saying here is start thinking about the end-to-end of what it is you're doing and what it means in business terms. And suddenly those metrics made a lot of people sit up and go, now I understand what we're doing. And being able to report that is quite important. So the next slide is actually how you get there. So on the left-hand side, it's quite quite a simple pyramid. I always think that PowerPoint will fail unless there's a pyramid in there somewhere. So top there, you have your business goals. What is the business trying to do? Beneath that are the business process KPIs, which we just looked at. And beneath all of those is business aligned IT metrics, which build up and build up and build up. So that's how you get to it. On the right hand side is a very simplified version. So business process KPI could be about purchase order placement for for sales. There will be business processes supporting that, and for simplicity, we'll just put 4 in there. For each of those business processes, there will be multiple IT processes. So we simplified it here, but it is a pyramid. So understand. So for example, on the left-hand side there, timely receipt of purchase request, there will be an IT process about the interface between the purchase request system. There'll be others as well. And for each of those IT processes, you'll have an IT KPI. And by conglomerating all of those, you can eventually get to a business process metric. Now, the one thing to be really, really clear about here is this is not a short process. To get to the stage where we could report lost cars at JLR took about 2 years, because you need to understand where the data is coming from, what the sources of data are, how it's processed, what the formula is to do that, how it's verified, how auditable, all these kind of things needed to be done. But when you get there, it's really quite powerful. So moving on, we mentioned as a service providers. Again, that was mentioned, I think, by Claire as well in her presentation. As a service is really difficult because in the middle there, you've got some of those challenges. Basically, as a service is pretty inflexible. You get what you pay for, which means service level management is very difficult. They won't generally participate in CSI projects. The change management is you get it when we give it to you, rather than we'll work with you for a good business window. And security, you need to in multinationals particularly, you need to know where your data is stored and how it's being transferred. So around the edge, and I'm not going to read all of these because it's quite a wordy slide. You need to take all these things into consideration. So service design, you need to design all your service around the as a service providers. Service level management, generally you have to create a black box around the as a service providers. You can work out what goes into them and what comes out the other end of it. In the middle, you just have to accept it because that's the way it is. Security compliance. Be clear about your requirements. Be clear about what legislation, what controls you need to have in place for regulatory purposes, and be very explicit that right at the start of the contracting process, and make sure they can tick all the right boxes and provide evidence for it. Governance, again, you're not going to get them to come to meetings, so you need people who deal on a daily basis to actually represent them at governance forums. Processes, again, build your processes around the black box, and tools. Tools are really important, and integration tools and e-bonding can make things a lot easier. There you go. So moving on, looking to the future. Right, looking to the future. So we're talking about the evolution of service delivery. And again, this is something that Claire picked up on earlier on in her presentation. Service delivery has changed over the years. Now, before I go into build this slide, I'm just going to say there's something about industry and there's something about service. They are not the same timetable. People will shout if I say this one. So Industry 1.0 was back in the sort of the 18th century, when sort of mechanization, water, steam power started changing the way we did things. First industrial revolution. 20th century brought in mass production, Henry Ford's big brainwave, and using electricity, so suddenly you didn't have to be near a river in order to do things. Then, into sort of the 70s, 80s, computers and automation came in. They moved to more intelligent, digital, on cloud, and automated stuff. And now we're into the realms of hyper customization and personalization, and looking more at customer experience. So rather than what can we provide, what does the customer want? So it's changing the viewpoint quite a lot. Service transformation, again, we'll stress again, different timetable. When the computers and automation came in, we had old processes, we have waterfall delivery, and ITSM came in at the end of the last century. And then we moved into kind of we started realizing that isolation of processes didn't work, and isolation of processes within suppliers was difficult, and service integration was born. And we moved from, once integration was there, oh, hang on, we can start automating these things. So we have integration and automation phase. And now we're into this product-centric and customer-centric approach of how do you deliver products, how do you deliver value to the customers, and how do you make sure that the products that you do deliver are based around the customer rather than telling them what they should have. So on the right side there, you can see, some things there from various sources. Organizations want to become customer-centric and improve user experiences. Digital transformation initiatives are there to increase profit margins and drive down costs. Organizations, agility and collaboration are really important, and therefore agile ways of working are becoming more important. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you look at the bottom of the sources, the dates 2019, 2016, 2017, this isn't new. However, it's taken a while for us to get to the point where we can start doing these kind of things. So it is now, it is what you need to do, and it means it requires a different approach to what we had in the old waterfall and ITSM days. A colleague of mine, another Martin Goebel, always says there is no such thing as agile SIAM, but there is SIAM in an agile environment, and I think that's one thing which is really important to remember. So what does SIAM look like in a product operating model? So look at the two teams. First team on areas is product teams. What do? They drive managed delivery, they make changes, they resolve problems, they share knowledge, and they manage, the important thing there, they manage their own day-to-day process activities and own that SLA compliance. And that's really important. They are self-regulating, they are self-sustaining, they are self-driving teams. So what does SIAM do? Some call it lean SIAM governance team. Develop the end-to-end service management strategy. So what are those standards that all the product teams need to at least understand in order to self-determine what they're going to do? We support the adoption of the practices within ITSM for Agile and DevOps. But the most important thing is to maintain that end-to-end service performance view. So it's not just looking at the individual vendors, it's looking at what's being delivered at the end and those kind of metrics I was talking earlier on about business value. Manage and coordinate cross-team dependencies. I know, some of the agile frameworks like SAFe will help do that too, but lean SIAM governance has a role in that. But also drive those optimization initiatives and effort to make sure that the value of the knowledge is shared across all the product teams, so that everyone's working in a similar way and they are benefiting from each other's experience. So what does that look like? This is the theory. There's a couple of slides about this. So the theory here is you have a client, you have infrastructure, and in the middle there you have your product teams, and your product teams will have a product owner, and then have various vendors all working together within that product team, doing everything from development to security to whatever else. The SIAM team is providing that governance across the piece. And ensuring that all of those various vendors within that infrastructure are delivering against their contracts, as well as delivering the products they need to. But they can also drive cooperation between the various tribes that are involved in that environment. So that's a theory. More realistically, you've probably got a mixture in most organizations. So on the left-hand side there, you've got your full product management environment where you've got Agile, DevOps, and everyone is sat within one team that needs to be there, including infrastructure. And you've probably got a couple of other teams there which are kind of a bit more sort of starting DevOps or safe, but they haven't got the shared infrastructure yet. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the old stuff, the old legacy teams who are still working in the way that people have been working in for the last 20 years. So the SIAM Centre of Excellence in this model needs to be able to adapt its approach depending on what part of that organisation you're working with. So be it much more heavy environment intervention within the legacy teams on the right-hand side, and a lot more light touch in the DevOps team on the left. So this is an actual example. This is an insurance company in Europe that we work with at the moment, and this is literally their current operating model. So there is an operational SIAM governance layer, and it says what it looks at is the operational matrices. How do all the products work together? The SLAs, the OLA governance, the overall KPIs, and developing that overall performance scorecard, both for vendor performance as well as product delivery. Within each of those product teams, there is a service manager, and that service manager is dedicated to that team and works with the rest of the team to ensure that the good ITSM stuff that we ask them to do is done, and is done effectively. But it helps there. It's more of a mentoring and coaching role than a police role that we particularly see in old days ITSM. So last slide, I'm glad to know. Where are we going in the future? So I think, as I said there on the left here, focus more on coaching and enabling rather than writing massive processes which people must follow to the letter. Understanding what the requirements are and then coaching people to deliver those. Driving value creation by identifying areas for improvement and sharing them across other product teams. Process and governance need to be embedded across, and the implementation of those processes is iterative. So you start with a very basic MVP process, and then you work on it as the product team develops. Process governance activities with product teams to make sure that yes, they have their own they have responsibility for doing things, but how do they do it, and what are the guardrails to stop them going off on tangents, to make sure they get a fairly consistent thing across the piece. We've got to start developing reporting in real time rather than a PowerPoint once a month saying how things happened last month. So it's about how that data drives decisions, how you course correct as you go. And then, the structure will depend very much on that team itself, and it will develop, as I said at the beginning, about developing a model as you go. And the picture on the right really is just kind of trying to encapsulate all that. There is a SIAM in the middle of all of this. The outside-in processes are the things that are being pushed down by the customer. So things like service levels, things like availability, things like business continuity, regulatory things. So that's driving the environment with the SIAM has to develop. And then you have inside-out processes, which are things like problem management, change management, and incident management, where the team themselves decide how they're going to do them within the guardrails the organisation and SIAM give them, and that's where the support and coaching comes into. And then around that, you've got tooling for self-healing and AI and reporting, etc., which is more and more important to get. The more automated you can, the better. And then dashboards. Real-time dashboards, which means that the team can make their own decisions at the right time, and the business understands what they're doing and can react as well. So that's kind of my view. That's 29 minutes. I'm quite impressed with that. There I am. If you want to contact me, by all means do so. I can see a load of things popping up in the chat, but I can't see what they are. So I'm happy to take any questions that anybody wants to ask.
Brilliant, Martin. Thank you very much indeed.